So the next section here is talking about some of the secrets or inner dimensions, if you will, of fasting. And this is where we really need to draw our attention. Everything else has been about the how-to and the mechanics. But the meaning behind it is the maqsood, right? What's intended. So it says fasting is of three types or three levels. And we found that this be the case in other things as well. There's various levels of people when it comes to fasting. The first is the general fast. The second is the fast of a particular group. And the third is a fast of the special worshipers, if you will. The general fast are those of the general community that their fast is all about their batan wal farj, right? The stomach and the privates. It's all about constraining their desires, refraining from eating and drinking and marital relations. That's what their fast is about. Just the mechanical part, the very physical element of fasting. That's what they focus on. The second one, which is the special fast, if you will, it's like a smaller group of the believers. It is to restrain the eye, the tongue, the hand, the foot, the hearing, the sight, and the remaining limbs from sin. This is the next step or the next level. So level 1 is down here. You're just meeting the requirements. Level 2 is now you are refraining from sin, other sins. So that means while you're fasting, not only you're not eating or drinking, but now you're not looking at things which are impermissible. You are not talking about things that are impermissible. You're not backbiting. You're not gossiping. You're not spreading rumors. You're not inciting trouble or staging protests. But what you're doing is you're refraining from impermissible speech as well. Not only the food, but as well as what you say. And then your hands and your feet, meaning you're not involved in sinful action. You're not going out transactions. You're not harming people physically. You're not walking in the direction of sinful behavior. You're not listening to sinful things. And you're not turning on you're not turning on your music, and you're not turning on the gossip shows, and you're not listening when someone does start to gossip, when someone does start to backbite, when someone does start. You either leave or you shut it down. You say, this is not the time. We can't do this. We have to redirect. And the same thing for the rest of the body. As for the next level, number 3, which is Sawm Khusus al-Khusus, which is the very, very special level of fasting, and this is done by the minority of people. It is Sawm al-Qalb an al-Himam ad-Dani'ah, which is to have the heart fasting from lowly objectives and desires, aspirations, right? To have the heart fast from the lowly, worldly aspirations. وَالْأَفْكَارِ الْمُبْعِدَةِ عَنِ اللَّهِ, the various thoughts which distract you from Allah. That you don't let your mind run loose and rampant and you're just off into outer space and you've forgotten about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are fasting from that. وَكَفُّهُ عَمَّا سِوَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى بِالْكُلِّيَّةِ, and also keeping the heart pure of or free of other things besides Allah in general. And that's something we talked about for tahara. If you remember, the 4th level of purity is purity of heart from other things besides Allah. And there's a number of explanations for this type of fasting, and I believe that will come some other time in the book. There are some manners that should be observed for Sawm al-Khusus, right? And I mentioned some of those, but he says lowering of the gaze, guarding the tongue from speech which is harmful or disliked, makruh, or even something which does not benefit, la yufid. There's no benefit. It's just idle talk. You want to avoid idle talk if you are on level number 2 or above. And then also to just be concerned and vigilant regarding, the actions that you embark upon and do. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever does not leave قول الزور, right, a false statement, والعمل به فليس لله حاجة في أن يدع طعامه والشرابه, whoever doesn't leave false speech or vain speech and acting in according to it, then Allah has no need for you to leave your food and drink. Which is clearly showing us that the objective behind fasting is not simply diet. It's not simply physical restraint from food and drink, but it's about character. Fasting is just as much about development of character than it is about the mechanical exercise of doing it. Also from the manners, this is key right here, we start getting a little bit serious, and this might put you in a spot. Right? And this is not meant to be directed at anybody in particular, just a general nasiha here from Imam Ibn Qudama. I'm just reading it. He says, don't fill up on food at night. You don't fill up on food at night, but you need to eat in proper proportions. He says, the worst vessel that man could fill is their own stomach. When you fill yourself at the beginning of the night, you cannot benefit from the rest of the night. If you fill yourself up at the beginning of the night, what happens? You're not going to be able to do anything for the rest of the night. The same thing goes for suhoor. If you fill yourself up during suhoor time, you're not going to be able to do anything until around dhuhr. Because when you eat a lot, it brings about lethargy and laziness. And we know that's the case. When you get all full, what's the thing? What's the next thing? You need to go lay down. You need to take a break. Whew! Got 6 months here, 6 month baby coming right here, man. Got to take it back. Got to take a step. And then, of course, you will miss the intent, or one of the intents of fasting, by eating too much food. Because when you're fasting, you should be able to taste hunger. By fasting, you should taste hunger. So if you gorge yourself, if you're thinking, well, got to maintain my caloric intake. I'm at like 2,500 calories or 3 or whatever, there's a number of people that they count those things, either for the purposes of, that's just their habit, or because they are involved in bodybuilding, and they say, I got to get my caloric intake up. And so you end up overdoing it on the food, and then you end up suffering later in the night, and you miss out on some of the benefits. So you have to, one of the objectives of fasting is to leave your desires just for a little while. Just to tame the desires for a little while. Voluntary fasting, it's preferred, especially in the days of reward and virtue. And there are various different days that some are better than others throughout the year, like fasting the 6 days of Shawwal after Ramadan, fasting Yawm Arafah, Yawm Ashura, fasting the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and Al-Muharram, fasting in Muharram. Some of them, they repeat every month, like fasting in the beginning of it, in the middle of it, or at the end of it. Fasting at the beginning of the month, or the beginning of it, the middle of it, or the end of it. Whoever does all of that, then that's good. If you fast a little bit here in the middle and the end. The best of that is that you fast you make those the 3 white days, which are in the middle of the month when the moon is at its fullest. When the moon is at its fullest. And then some of those days they repeat every week, like fasting Yawm al-Ithnain, Yawm al-Khamis, which is Mondays and Thursdays. The best and most virtuous fast, voluntary fast, is that of Dawood alayhi salam, which is fasting a day and eating a day. And by doing this, you combine between 3 things, fasting a day and eating a day. Why is this the best fast? Number 1, because the day that you eat, you give your body what it needs. And the day that you fast, you give your soul its portion of worship. Okay, so you're balanced. One day for your body and one day for your soul, right? Because fasting is worship. Okay, so you're kind of living between the two. This is a balanced life by combining between fasting a day and eating a day. He says, the day in which you eat is the day of gratitude. And the day in which you fast is the day of patience. And your faith is based on two parts, nisfan, one half patience, one half gratitude. And so by fasting and breaking your fast like this, you embody that spirit. The last thing is that it's harder on the soul, harder on the nafs. When you're in the jihad of nafs, when you're struggling against yourself, this is harder on the soul, breaks it down. As the soul gets used to one thing, you take it somewhere else. Keep changing up on. You don't let it get stuck and get settled. Let it stagnate. But you keep working away at it. Just keep on pounding away at that nafs. The moment that it gets satisfied with just eating all the time, or it gets used to fasting, because sometimes you notice in Ramadan, by now, we're good. Fasting's good, man. No problem. In the beginning, getting the rust off, just kind of maybe a little headache here and there, a little tired. But by now, the body's gotten used to it. So you know what? If we kept it up, we could probably just continue it on. But by stopping, you jar that nafs. You put it in an uncomfortable position, then you eat. And so by doing that, you kind of keep yourself on your toes, if you will, by changing things up. It says, as for fasting the entire year, Sawm al-Dahr, says it was reported by Muslim from a hadith of Abu Qatada that Umar radiallahu anhu asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about fasting the entire year, which he said, La sama wa la aftar. He didn't fast and he didn't break his fast. Lam yasum wa lam yuftir, and another one, he didn't fast nor did he break his fast. And what's understood by this, or how this should be interpreted, is that continuing your fast throughout the year, including the days in which it's impermissible to fast. Like Eid, for example, or Ayyam Tashriq. As for a person that fasts the entire year straight through, but they break their fast on those days, al-Eidain wa Ayyam Tashriq, then there's no harm in doing so. It was reported that Hisham ibn Urwa was the son of Urwa ibn Zubayr ibn Awam. He was a tabi'i, right? Followed the companions in generation. It was reported that his father would continuously fast. It was also reported that Aisha radiallahu anha also practiced the same thing. Anas ibn Malik was reported that Abu Talha fasted after the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continuously for 40 years. So you can see that to fast every day is also something that was practiced by the pious of the past. Getting to the conclusion here, he says, it's important to know that for those that have been blessed with astuteness or brilliance, they understand the purpose of fasting. They understand the higher objective of fasting, and they try to take themselves with what is not out of their reach to something which is much better. Fasting is not out of your scope. But the inner dimensions of fasting are what are going to elevate you much higher in your spiritual pursuits, in your journey to Allah and the home of the hereafter. That's what's going to get you the distance. Is doing that which is not out of your scope, but in a way with an intentionality that will be much more meaningful than the physical act. That means you have to strive to get to level 2, where you're now refraining from sin. And then you strive to the level 3, where you're now guarding your heart from being distracted from Allah. And it begins with the fast. Here, it's also, this is key here. I've experienced this myself personally in a number of settings. Ibn Mas'ud fasted very little. He fasted very little. And he said, when I fast, I'm weakened from prayer. And I have chosen prayer over fasting. Okay? So everyone needs to address themselves accordingly. So he says, some of them, if they fasted, They became too weak to read the Quran. And therefore they would not fast much at all, but they would constantly be breaking their fast, meaning they would not perform voluntary fasts. We're not talking about obligatory Ramadan. And they did so in order that they could increase their recitation of the Quran. So every person has to do what is most beneficial for them and what they're capable of doing. They know themselves best. Some people are, this is the deal with that, some people are inclined to fasting. Fasting is a type of worship that resonates with them. It does something for them. They understand the meaning of it. They understand the intent of it. They understand how it affects their nafs, and so they fast. They see the fruit of it. Some people, however, physically don't respond well to it, and they find themselves unable to perform other things. When it gets in the way, because it is a voluntary action, when it gets in the way, then that's where you need to reevaluate and assess further. If I'm not going to be able to perform other things which I desire to perform, like for example, if I'm a student of knowledge and my pursuit is learning, where I have to be focused and I have to be energetic, if I respond to fasting by my body getting weak, my mind getting cloudy, and I can't focus on my studies, I can't focus on memorization of the Quran, then it may be that person is better off not fasting. There may be a person that says, look, I'm not doing any of that. I'm not out trying to memorize hadith, and I don't, you understand my meaning. And so fasting may be the best thing for me. Right? So that's something to be taken into consideration. And it's also something to remember that when you're fasting and you see other people not fasting, keep it personal. Don't start becoming Judge Judy here, right? Judge Judy, you're the boss applesauce. She's the TV judge, those court TV shows, passing the judgment on everybody, right? You just keep it personal. Maybe they're doing something that you're not doing. Maybe they're embarked upon some spiritual pursuit that you've never even attempted. And Allah knows best. Jazakallah khair for your patience and your attentive listening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in the remaining days of this month, to increase us in our righteousness and to purify our hearts from any sickness and disease. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.